In the quietest moment in the garden, the heavy work of the seasons is complete. The soil is dark and rested. The perennial beds, those deep-rooted virtues that form the unseen core, stand in calm silhouette against the fading light. The sanctuary no longer hums with effort. It resonates with a settled stillness. There's nothing left to plant, nothing urgent to weed, no harvest being measured or weighed. And in that quiet, something else becomes audible. It's a sound that was always present beneath the noise of construction and the chatter of cultivation. Not the rustle of leaves, not the movement of wind, but the hum of the garden itself. The frequency at which soil, root, stem, and fruit vibrate as a single integrated system. This is the full circle return. The realization arrives gently. The entire journey was never about building something separate. It was about remembering, about tuning an instrument back to its native pitch. What once felt like effort now feels like alignment. What once required discipline now moves as instinct. We began by learning how to receive. We spoke early of becoming receptive hardware, of clearing internal static so light, information, and wisdom could enter without distortion. We practiced being good soil. Rain was allowed to soak in. Sun was met without resistance. Even pain and joy were listened to as carriers of instruction rather than interrupters. That was the first phase, becoming capable of holding something real. But a vessel, no matter how well formed, is defined by its emptiness. Its purpose is to be filled, and when it fills to the point of overflow, it changes its nature. It stops being defined by what it can contain and begins to express the quality of what it holds. That is the final shift. At some point, often unnoticed at first, it becomes clear that we are no longer waiting to be charged by the universe. The recognition lands with the familiarity of homecoming. The charging is complete. The accumulation has finished its long arc. What was absorbed did not merely nourish, it became. The light taken and organized the system. The wisdom metabolized, reorganized perception. The resilience, forged in storms, now radiates outward as calm rather than defense. The universe is no longer something external acting upon this life. The universe is expressing as this life. The old masters understood this accumulation without needing to explain it directly. They did not manufacture followers, they planted mirrors. Their parables were not lessons to memorize, but tuning forks struck in silence, designed to awaken resonance over time. Seeds, soil, vines, branches, these were never agriculture instructions. They were descriptions of inner architecture. Their teachings unfolded slowly, trusting life itself to complete the transmission. In their highest expression, the master disappeared as authority and reappeared as reflection, not pointing toward themselves, but revealing the same luminous source, looking back from within the listener. The journey ended not at the feet of a teacher, but in the recognition that teacher and student were movements of the same field. That same movement completed itself here. So what does this accumulated universe do once it becomes conscious of itself? It does not rest in stillness alone. It moves, but from abundance rather than striving. First it speaks. This speaking has nothing to do with persuasion or opinion. It is not an attempt to convince or convert. It is resonance expressing itself naturally. Words, when they arise, carry the density of lived experience and the lightness of insight earned rather than borrowed. This is a speech of those who pass on gathered understanding, not as commandment, but as observation, not answers carved in stone, but questions shaped carefully enough to keep unfolding. In this mode, voice becomes an instrument tuned to seasons rather than ideology. Meaning moves through tone. timing, and presence as much as through language itself. Second, it gardens. But this gardening no longer resembles frantic self-improvement. It becomes a serene art of tending what is already alive. With the inner landscape ordered, attention moves outward with patience and creativity. Relationships, communities, projects, these are no longer sites of control, but environments where conditions are quietly adjusted so life can flourish on its own terms. Responsibility shifts from obligation to belonging. Action arises from understanding participation rather than ownership. Building and creating become sacred conversations with the field itself. Shared efforts, where the act of bringing something meaningful into form matters as much as the form itself. Third, and most quietly, it holds the mirror. This is the subtlest offering. When internal conflict has softened and perception has healed, presence itself becomes reflective. Listening no longer rushes toward fixing. Attention no longer interrupts with solutions. Space is offered where others can recognize their own strength, their own coherence, their own wisdom. Without being told, it exists. In a world saturated with noise, the act of seeing clearly and without agenda becomes revolutionary. Safety emerges. Authenticity finds room to breathe. Growth happens without force. In this way, the sanctuary that was cultivated inwardly becomes available outwardly, not as doctrine, but as atmosphere. This is not an ending. This is a new orientation. The seeker becomes a source without trying to be one. The student realizes the lesson was never separate. The universe, having gathered stardust, memory, attention, and consciousness into this singular expression, begins to speak through tone, through gesture, through presence. The garden stands complete, not as a finished object, but as a living field. It was never just a place to tend. It was the cosmos learning how to bloom in human form. And now it speaks. It speaks in kindness without effort, in creativity without strain, in moments of quiet steadiness that need no explanation. It speaks whenever space is held instead of filled, whenever attention remains when distraction would be easier, whenever peace appears not as escape but as home. In that speaking, something new is planted, not through instruction, not through force, but through resonance alone. The most potent seed there is the lived proof that transformation happens, the coherence is possible, and that what we are has always been the universe, patiently, miraculously accumulating into light.